This video is all about mobile sculpting really, so if anything it's more of a chat about where we're at with mobile sculpting. And the reason I thought I'd do this video now is because you may be new to mobile sculpting and you may not know what there is out there and what is coming. So I'll go through the current state of play and what's about to hit the market. So I wanted much more of a conversational type of video. So this video is really all about I suppose the history of mobile sculpting. So I've been digitally sculpting since, if you take it as actual digital sculpting, since about 98, 99. And that's because prior to that, I wasn't using ZBrush. I was using Maya, Lightwave, and then things on the Amiga or the Amiga 1200, which were polygonal 3D modeling programs. So there was Maya Artisan, which was a way of manipulating geometry, but it was nothing like we would know as digital sculpting today. Most things back then were scanned in and then manipulated in programs like Maya, as I've said, and they were wherever there was high polygon data needed, it was scanned in off clay models. And it was very, very difficult to use it. So I started digitally sculpting really with a program called Morphium, which was like a pottery tool. And then by 98, 99, I was hearing about Pixologic and ZBrush. And that got me very, very quickly. By 99, I was quite excited about the what was basically called 0.87 version of ZBrush. And that was at SIGGRAPH, and basically from then, you know, people started knowing that there was an option to sculpt. It was 2.5D. It wasn't a full sculpting package that we would know today. You couldn't sculpt in any way as we do today. There were pens, digital pens, and you know, and this is the early days of Wacom as well. So there was a way to manipulate things on screen, but most people were modeling with either CAD or polygonal modeling, and using a mouse. That was pretty much the main tool. So by 99, we could see the possibilities of digital sculpting and where it's going to go. And by 2002, that was well established. You know, it was used on the Lord of the Rings, the one with the cave trolls. So that's when people who you may know like Bay Ray were really heavily you know, doing work in polygonal modeling, so making the face for Gollum in programs like Mirai and Maya, but then alongside that was running the digital sculpting world of ZBrush. And that's when Mudbox came along. So obviously a chap called Dave Cardwell and a couple of his buddies down in Weta kind of developed Mudbox, which became the two things that we were sculpting with back then. Mobile wasn't a thing, so there wasn't smartphones, there wasn't other than the odd very clunky laptop. So there was one by the mid 2000s. There was something called a Toshiba Tecra, and there were some models around where you could actually draw on the screen. But the ones that I experienced were heavy, clunky, you know, overheated. The Toshiba Tecra, as I say, is one that I used to use by 2005, 2006. But in terms of mobile sculpting, there was nothing. There was no iPad. There was no a tablet as such. You know, people were debating what, you know, even before the iPad came along, there was, what are we going to call these things? Is it going to be a slate? Is it going to be a tablet? It was a name that was mooted, but nobody really got that right early on. And then that's when things changed. 2010, once Apple released an iPad, there basically wasn't something that we could see as a creative tool going forward could be quite influential. However, Steve Jobs didn't think that anyone needed a pencil. So Steve Jobs and Apple's vision back then was pretty much pinch and zoom, all of this stuff with your finger. So people were painting with their finger, but there was no sculpting. So we had to then wait until we got the Apple Pencil. And as soon as the Apple Pencil came along, and Procreate came along, and the janky Photoshop came along, which was a bit later, people could see that this was a viable option as a creative tool. And that's when I got interested. So I got the very first iPad, wasn't particularly overly, it was a media device, wasn't really interested. As soon as I saw the pencil, then I thought, right, this is a potential that we can use. I was using a Cintiq, I was using a Wacom Intuos 3, I was drawing on these products, but I couldn't really have wished for more than what we've got now. The fact that that would go mobile was always my dream. So in the mid 2015, 16, I started to really think about how else we could go mobile with sculpting, and how else could I move away from the desk. And that's when I got heavily into something that's not really going to be talked about in this video, but VR, so VR sculpting. And that's how I ended up working alongside, or working with what was then Oculus Medium. And if you look at this channel and you look at some of the stuff I was doing 6 and 7 years ago, you'll see that I was doing a lot of voxel sculpting in a headset. So in the very first Oculus Rift headsets, and I still do that today. I've now got a master's in that. I teach that. I'm now an immersive XR tutor in a university, so that's obviously a big part of my life and my career. But alongside that trajectory came true mobile sculpting in the form of Forger app. When Forger app was developed in the earlier 2010 onwards, so once we had an iPad and a pencil, that really opened my eyes to a potential competitor longer term to ZBrush. I never thought for 1 minute we'd get as far as we have. And Blender came along with some sculpting options, which is an amazing tool. It didn't ever replace ZBrush for me, but obviously a fantastic tool overall. But Forger app, we started to make videos with Forger app, and I loved it. I was sculpting with a mobile device, with an Apple Pencil, on the couch, on the train, in the car. It gave me everything that I wanted as a mobile tool, not mobile way to do it. And I then thought, right, now it's time for a YouTube channel that we'll start talking about that. Let's basically make ourselves a YouTube channel about that kind of sculpting. I'd done lots and lots of years and years of ZBrush sculpting, but I really wanted to focus on how to get people who are new to sculpting and even creation. It's some people who have never ever created. How can we get them into this industry and into this exciting hobby? So that's when I started the YouTube channel really full-time, focusing on that. And my mantra became how to help people create in new and innovative ways, and I still stick with that today. That's still our mantra in Southerngfx. And my goal really was to introduce people to a cheap way to get in and do what I do. So yes, I could have stuck with Blender because it's free, but that would require the PC, the Wacom tablet at the time. I wouldn't use anything else at the time, and I just chose not to go that way. I liked the idea of fully mobile, and I was just hoping that it would evolve into what it's suddenly become, or not suddenly become, but what it's evolved into. So we were going full steam ahead with our Forger courses, and we were doing well with it. I was enjoying it. The program was good. And it was basically doing everything that I wanted to some degree. The thing that was missing was real-time rendering, like we got with Blender Eevee. ZBrush didn't have that and still doesn't have that, but that's good enough because we can still render what we've got. That's not the easiest thing for new users, because real-time rendering, basically as you're sculpting, you see it live and you can move the lighting, and that makes a big difference to new users, because they're actually seeing the end result as they're making it, which is, I found, a big difference for new people. So that's when it changed. So we then got, Stefan developed the first commercial version of what is obviously now Nomad Sculpt. And Nomad Sculpt is a game changer in any shape or form, whichever way you look at it. It's a sculpting app, it's a painting app, it handles multi-million polygons, and it has got a real-time rendering with post-processing. That was the biggest pivot, that was the biggest game changer. And also around that time, Maxon bought Forger app and put it behind a paywall. So not that I'm criticizing that, because that's a commercial decision, but if you look at what's happened since they bought that, it's pretty much stagnated apart from one aspect. And that aspect is they added polygonal tools, which again is something I absolutely love. Is polygonal modeling is really important to me as a production artist. However, I found it unstable. I found things like the symmetry don't work predictably, and some of the basic core functions just didn't work in a way that would make me want to support it further down the line. Even the subscription didn't bother me, because if I'm using it, I can make money with it, but I couldn't make it work how I wanted it to. However, the trajectory of Nomad Sculpt just carried on into an amazing level. Now, the one thing we didn't get with Nomad Sculpt, and we still don't have, is we don't have polygonal tools for manipulating points, faces, edges. But a lot of people don't particularly want that. They want to sculpt and then take it to another package and then retopologize it. But the actual core act of sculpting, painting, doing some of the technical, the tech work, as I would call it, so UV mapping, UV unwrapping, which Forger app did have early on, doing things like projection, where you project a high polygon onto a low polygon, which is where we go to games and things like that, where it needs a low polygon model. And all of that wasn't catered for. So I put all of our effort into Nomad Sculpt, and then it exploded in lots of ways. So you got people like Dave Reed, who came along, who does exceptional work with stylized characters. We got people like Small Robot Studios, who does some really good technical videos, and lots of other people were jumping in and actually making the videos, which made it a really basically it made it good for YouTube, because now multiple people were doing it. We actually had the algorithm was working, it was pushing the videos out, and it just became what I always wanted it to be, which is a community around mobile sculpting. So fantastic, cannot fault it, still love it. I'm going to support it all the way down the line, even if it gets, if the developer Stefan decides to sell up at some point and move it into the hands of Adobe or some other giant, then I'll still support it, because it's such a fantastic product. And one of the reasons it's fantastic is because the developer's background was in Sketchfab, and if you know Sketchfab and you know their real-time aspects in Sketchfab, and Sketchfab is where you can show your work online, like models on a website. Well, obviously that's real-time rendering, like something like Marmoset Toolbag, and obviously a lot of what we get in Nomad Sculpt reflects that, and kind of the history that developer had making those kind of products. Amazing product all around. So what's next then? So in the last couple of years, a couple of things have come along. So one, polygonal modeling has started to become a thing, and there's quite a few smaller apps out there. The one that I'm using a bit, and I've shown you on this channel, is Valence 3D app. So that is progressing nicely. The developer there over in America there is really adding the tools that a lot of people like me would want, and he's listening to a lot of people who are using it and developing it. And then another tool came along, which was called Cozy Blanket. And Cozy Blanket basically is a UV, a retopology tool, should I say, and does UVs as well. So that means you can take your sculpt from packages like Nomad, and you can retopologize it and give yourself a high poly and the low poly, which means it does everything that I described earlier. And that's something that we generally all want. If you want to move beyond using just the model inside the app. And then another one came along. So on the back of that, the developer there developed one called Uniform. Now, I deliberately haven't started with Uniform because I believe the learning curve is quite hard. But there's a few people out there. Brant Peters is one of them. I'd love to mention him because he always jumps onto things like that in deep dives. And he's getting the full pipeline in that app. So that's sculpting, and then moving it into low poly and games. So I will cover that in the future, but I need to have the right amount of time to make sure I'm at the right level myself to teach that one. But it proves that people are willing to put the effort into developing these things. So we've got Valence app for modeling, we've got Uniform coming along for the full pipeline, and obviously what comes along next? Well, we're waiting for ZBrush for iPad. Now that's already announced. I've been on the beta team since it started, so I obviously know a lot about it, and I'm super excited to share that when we're allowed to share anything that we've been doing on the beta team. And you'll see some images already. They're announced. They're showing a lot of that. And I'll be doing a course on ZBrush for iPad as soon as I'm available to, as soon as I'm allowed to share that. I'm doing lots of articles about it for Creative Bloq, so watch out. I'll post it on the channel when I've done those articles. But that will really throw more pressure into the marketplace of mobile sculpting, because then we've got the granddaddy of digital sculpting entering the market at a late stage. So that will basically give people options. Now we know it's Max on, so we know that it's going to be behind a paywall. They have announced already at their announcement that there will be a free version, so that's fantastic. But let's see where we go with that, and we'll see where this takes us. If you add in all of those, add into all of those things like Procreate and now Procreate Dreams, and things like LumaFusion, which is an editing package, then we have quite a useful set of tools on a mobile device. And the mobile devices are getting faster and faster and faster. So we've gone through the Apple M1, M2, no M3, and gone straight to the M4. And the hardware, so even the iPad Air M2, which I just reviewed for Creative Bloq, I'll put a link down below. They're very, very strong devices now. They're very good with those chips. They can handle a lot. And obviously the newest M4 iPad is actually, if you read my review again down below, it's overpowered for what we've got on the market at the moment. So that will, in the next couple of years, that with the new Apple Pencil Pro is going to be the tool to have when the software catches up a little bit. But it's an exciting place to be at the minute. So mobile sculpting has grown into its own sector. There's money to be made for developers. There's money to be made for content creators within that space in terms of training and YouTube channels, and showing your work that way. It's a very tough marketplace at the moment for artists overall. AI has disrupted the market completely in all sectors. The market is growing in a lot of areas that are including AI, and it's shrinking in a lot of other areas with generative AI. And that's something that I'm going to look at over the next 4 or 5 years in university. I'm going to start studying some of that from our point of view. And I will only really ever use the AI tools that can be proved to not be scraped data. So tools like Viscom is something I'm going to use where I know that their data is coming from Shutterstock, and I want to make that clear. I'm not a fan of generative AI overall, and you will see that I've only ever posted one AI video, and that's when I was using it commercially to learn it well over a year or so ago. So an exciting time for mobile sculpting, lots more to come, lots of people like me, content creators and educators who are jumping into the sector. You'll see a huge push with ZBrush because a lot of people will jump in and start making content, which will push all the algorithm up for everybody and make it more exciting. And I still stand by what I said earlier. If you remember my mantra, which is helping people create in new and innovative ways, well, what better way than using an iPad, which a lot of people have, and even an Android. Obviously, if you're not an Apple lover and you don't have an Apple device, Android there is a tablet that you can use, several tablets you can use Nomad Sculpt with on Android, so you're not left out if you're in that world. So mobile sculpting is here to stay. It's going to get better. We pray that one day Apple see the benefits of a 16-inch iPad. It would be super expensive. Look at the Apple Vision Pro, the price tag there. But if they give us that, I'll be buying it that night. I'll find the money that night. So thanks for watching the video. It's a very different way. I just wanted to do a face to camera just to let you know some of my thoughts and some of the history of how we got to this point. And thank you for watching this video. So if you like this kind of thing, please give it a thumbs up, and it does help us to get in front of other people who like this kind of content. And obviously, if you like it and you've given it a thumbs up, then why not subscribe to the channel? We've got lots and lots coming in the next few years. And obviously, I've made a few announcements on my social medias about the fact that I'm no longer doing production art. I am now just teaching. So I'm a lecturer at a university here in England. And I'm doing that so that I can do my PhD and focus on more of this. So more teaching creative skills to people who want to learn it. So join me on the channel, subscribe to the channel, and let's get creative.